I think we have some people out there, about 7 now. I assume that some others will show up, so I
Someone's
will.
saying you're having an audio problem.
Oh, having an audio problem.
I can hear you. That's interesting.
Hmm.
Make sure you're not muted.
I'm not muted.
Okay, they're good now.
Okay. I think we have a few people out there, so I'm going to start talking because I just love to hear myself. Also, I feel that you're paying for this; you deserve something, or maybe you've sinned and you deserve something. In either case, the reward or the punishment is me talking. So this is the Islamic Humanities class, Integrated Humanities 242, and for winter 2021. And I'm Daniel Peterson, and we'll wait for just a few minutes to get fully underway. I want to talk a little bit about what the class will entail, and then I want to give you a kind of gee whiz, isn't this fun presentation on PowerPoint, which you will not be accountable for. It's designed partly to just whet your appetite, maybe, and give you some sense of what we're going to be looking at in the course of the course. So, well, we are recording this, so I suppose I can just go ahead, really, because those who are coming in late can always go back and look at it. So, Islamic Humanities. What kind of a class is this? Well, it's a fraction of what it ought to be. The Islamic world is a civilization that extends from, say, roughly 600 A.D. until now, covering an area that runs from Indonesia and Malaysia and the Philippines, I suppose, all the way over to Morocco and historically into Spain. So across North Africa and the Middle East and down both coasts of Africa up into what used to be Soviet Central Asia, Turkey, and so on, into southeastern Europe. It's a really rich civilization. The three dominant languages of it are Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, but there are many others: Swahili and Urdu, and we could go on and on and on, and smaller languages than those. But this class is an attempt, a kind of first pass attempt to look at the culture and civilization of the Islamic world. And I even want to say a word about that term Islamic. What does it mean to be looking at the Islamic world? Some of the things we'll be looking at are not especially connected with religion. Many of the things are, but not all. And so there was a great scholar back in the 60s by the name of Marshall G.S. Hodgson. He was an Englishman who was teaching at the University of Chicago, who argued that we ought to be using, in many cases, the adjective Islamicate or Islamicate, ending in ate, for things that belong to the dominant Islamic civilization, but were not particularly religious. I mean, after all, Ernest Hemingway wrote in a predominantly Christian society, but he wasn't a Christian writer. I don't think anyone would claim him to be that. The White House or Grand Central Station comes out of a largely Christian society, but neither one is an example of Christian architecture. Christian architecture would be, say, the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, or something like that. Christian literature would be Dante's Divine Comedy or C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. But Hemingway is not Christian in that same sense, and the Symphony Hall, or whatever it's called in Los Angeles, is not an example of Christian architecture either. Whereas nearby, the great Cathedral of Los Angeles, the new one, is an example of Christian architecture. So we're really talking about Islamicate humanities here. This is not a religion class, although we will be talking about the religion of Islam necessarily because it's such a dominant force in the Islamic world and created it in a way. I want to go through the syllabus. All of you should have access to the syllabus at this point. And I just want to comment on a few things that may arouse confusion or whatever. If you want to write questions to me, feel free to do it. Notice that you should not contact me through Learning Suites. You should use the email address dspegypt@gmail.com and title it IHUM242, all caps, IHUM242. That makes it easier for us to pick it out and to recognize emails from students in the class. I get a lot of emails. I have some other hats that I wear, even beyond being a professor at BYU, and I get a lot of email correspondence, much of it nasty, you might be pleased to know. And so I want to be sure to recognize something that you've sent. You will get priority if you write to me using IHUM242 via dspegypt@gmail.com. That's in the syllabus right at the beginning. I give you my cell phone number. Use that when you need to. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but usually you can reach me via email, and that'll be enough. If there's something urgent, if you need to call me, do so. I have a TA with me this term, Bryn Morse, and she may even be watching right now. I don't know. But her email address is given there, and you can contact her, and she will be a good conduit to me as well. And she may be the good cop in the good cop, bad cop scenario. That she will be your advocate with me. I mentioned a midterm examination, approximately the 25th of February. I haven't chosen an exact date because it's probably going to be virtual, and it just seems to me that it's different doing that than when it used to be. It used to have to be done in class. So I will tell you as we get closer when it's going to be, but count on it being approximately the 25th of February. And the final exam, April 16th, I may make that more flexible and give you more than one day to do it, certainly a longer time. As we move along, we'll see how that works out. There will be quizzes given at the beginning of class after each reading, or you can take them during the period before class. That's better.
They have to be taken before class.
Yeah, they should be taken before class. That's an error in the syllabus that needed to be changed. From back in the old days, you may have heard of these days when we used to attend classes and teach in person. It was done once upon a time. So we're a little more flexible on quizzes. We'll give you a little longer time to take them. You will be able to drop your lowest score. We'll drop it for you when final grades are reckoned. So if you miss a quiz, that's the one that will be dropped. Make-up quizzes will only be given for illness or other extenuating circumstances with my permission. These are, in a way of keeping a kind of attendance. I want to make sure that you're participating in class, listening to my scintillating lectures, and so on. Then I give you an overview of the schedule of the class. There may be an occasion where we'll get behind, but this is pretty much the way I've planned it out because there's a lot to cover. And if I get behind, then it's hard to make it up. You'll see in this that certain things are marked. Let me go to the back, though, and talk about the assignments that are listed there and the required texts. This is heavily a literature class. It's not all it is, but because it's humanities, but covers a lot of literature, a lot of reading. And I have to tell you that up front, it is a lot of reading, and you don't want to get behind in it. Quite a number of books that are assigned there. And I made a change in course in this class many years ago, well, quite a few years ago now. We used to read a lot of snippets from various authors. That seemed to me to be more of a memorization class. I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to read longer books that I thought were significant and that I thought you might enjoy or profit from. Even if at the time you're reading them you don't think you're profiting from them, that they might be the kind of thing that would linger in your memory. And let me give you a little background on what inspired me to do that. I read an account of a professor formerly teaching philosophy at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana, who left Notre Dame to open up a series of courses for executives on philosophy, philosophical texts, or other important texts. And a lot of people have reported, executives who participated in this have reported that it was really helpful to them in their business life. They were people who probably didn't care about philosophy or reading King Lear or Plato's Republic when they were younger. They were headed for a career in business and they knew it, so they studied accounting or whatever it was. But at a certain point, they reach a place in their careers where they want to step back and think. And the idea is this fellow leads retreats where people will sit back away from their business. And he's had people like Bill Gates and others involved in these classes, heads of major corporations. And they've read some of the classic texts. And then, I should have mentioned Tom Pittman, who will be working with me as my exploited neighbor and friend, who will be doing technical support for me. And he's really good, and he's saved me already today from multiple disasters. So there he is, Tom, from Sitka, Alaska. So he's suffering every winter. He suffers through the heat wave here in Utah. But in these courses, people would read through King Lear. And they'd say, this is amazing. I don't think it would have meant anything to me when I was 21. But now that I'm 55 and the head of a corporation, man, King Lear really, really makes sense to me. I understand. Even though I'm not a medieval king, I am the CEO of a corporation, and I've met the kinds of people that are trying to do me in or that are dangerous for the corporation and so on. I thought that was a really interesting comment. And I then was reading about the man who sort of founded the whole idea of the MBA, who taught in the United States. And he even wrote a book about, he was an Austrian economist who came to the United States. He even wrote a book about management secrets that you could learn from reading the novels of Jane Austen. I thought, now that's really, really interesting. He said Jane Austen was worth more than any management text he'd ever seen. So that was Peter Drucker was his name. Very, very famous fellow who just died at about 100 and something a few years back. And I thought, there's truth in this. And I remember talking to my brother at one point about, and my brother had gone into running the family construction business. He got a law degree and then ran the family construction business. But I asked him once, what course at BYU when you were an undergraduate did you enjoy the most? Now he was very much different than I am, the man of practical affairs and so on. His favorite course was a course on Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales. He said he just found himself thinking about that all the time, the things they'd read in the Canterbury Tales. So I thought it would be fun to organize a course on, based on books that I thought might resonate with you, maybe not even now, to be honest, but maybe 10 years, 15, 20 years down the line, you'd think back and say, that is just like that book I read in that boring characters class. The first text that we read is the Kalila and Dimna of Bidpai or Ibn al-Muqaffa. And it's a series of animal fables, the earliest Arabic prose work of any significance in literature. And it's a collection of stories about the dangers of life at court. Now, you're probably not going to live at court or serve as a courtier, but you may well work in a business office where there are still scheming people and so on. And this may someday, I hope not too much, seem relevant to you. And other books I chose just because they seem to me relevant to life. You may not see that immediately. I hope you will, but you may not. But they're books I thought people ought to read. Now, there is, as I looked it over, as I put together this list, I realized it has a somewhat Persian bias. There's no particular reason for that. It's just the way the list turned out. And this is sort of a great books course in a way from that side of great Islamic literature. There's nothing in it, though, from Turkish. There's relatively speaking, the Arab tradition is underrepresented. I could have even easily chosen a different 10 books. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of books in the Islamic tradition that are well worth reading not just by specialists and not just by Muslims, but by anybody anywhere who wants to read great literature, great philosophy, great thinking. But this is my take for this course, and I hope you'll like it. One book in particular I'm mentioning that's really long is the Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings by Ferdowsi. It's so long that I'm going to be giving quizzes on it to you throughout the semester because I want you to start reading it right away, as soon as you can, because it's really long. It's not hard. It's stories. It's stories about battles and kings and princesses and things like that. But it goes on and on and on. It's the world's longest epic poem by a single author. It's the national epic of Iran. And I really believe that, for example, some of you may be going on, you hope, into careers in international relations or something. I think to understand Iran, you need to understand the Shahnameh. It's the book that they all grow up with. It's their national epic. So I haven't chosen these books out of madness. There's a reason for them. And I think that they'll be relevant to you. Okay, so those are the required texts. Let me say something about another one of them. This one worries me a bit. One of the books is Al-Ghazali's Path to Sufism, his deliverance from error. Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, and there's an error there. Al-Munqidh shouldn't have a second U in it. We tend to do that automatically in English, but it doesn't belong there in Arabic. This book, Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, is the deliverer from error, is how I would translate it, not deliverance from error. But anyway, we had a problem last semester that many students couldn't get a hold of the book. So I want you to try now to get it. If you can't get it, I may have to readjust things. However, there are other translations available, one I know and one that I don't know. So if getting it is a significant problem, I don't think it will be. I just checked, and I think there are more in stock at Amazon. But if it is a problem, I can recommend to you at least one other translation. There it is, Al-Ghazali's Path to Sufism, his deliverance, or I would say his deliverer from error. That's a translation by R.J. McCarthy. There's a translation by W.M. Watt, W-A-T-T, that is also very good. In fact, it's the first translation I ever read. And it's very, very good. And either one would be acceptable. So check and see if you can get this one. If you can't, try the other one. If you need more information, I'll send it to you. W.M. Watt. And I think it's called The Spiritual Journey of Al-Ghazali. And I think that's still available in various editions. Watt was a very, very great Arabist. And I recommend that one to you. All right. Let's see, evaluation. Reading quizzes, I've already mentioned them. Let me talk to you about the chronology and geography quiz, which is worth 5% of your final grade. I would be delighted if all of you were to get 100% on this, and really, you should, because I will give you everything that's going to be on the quiz in advance. There are no surprises, no tricks, nothing. It's just that I want people to know where the Middle East is, and I can't count on that, alas, from all Americans. I saw a study some years ago that indicated that a plurality of Americans were unable to locate Canada on a map. Now, Canada is not hard to find. Canada is, if you point north, you'll hit Canada, unless you live in Alaska or Hawaii. So it's not difficult, and it's rather large. It's not a small object. But so, I've thought, okay, what luck are people going to have knowing where Syria is, or Morocco, or Lebanon, or Cairo? So I want to make sure you do know. So I'm going to give you a list of the things that you need to know, and I'm going to give you maps and have you mark them. If you get 100%, fantastic. I'm really pleased. And you should, because I will give you everything that will be on the quiz. Your job is to simply give it back. And then thereafter, I'll probably put a few geographical issues on the midterm and certainly on the final. Because I want you for a little while to remember where the Middle East is. And when I mention that a building is in Cairo, I want you to know where that is. I want you to know where India is and things like that. So that's the geography chronology quiz. That was inspired by by a person who graduated from BYU in Near East. There's Canada, in case any of you are curious. Yeah, it's easily found, especially because it's all red. So, but I discovered there was a person who graduated in Near Eastern Studies from BYU many years ago who did not know where Mecca was. And I thought, good grief, how did that happen? Well, you will know where Mecca is in this class because I'll give it to you on a map, or I'll give it to you in a list. You'll find it on a map. It's easy. And then I'll give you a map and you'll tell me where it is and you will know. So you'll be ahead of many Americans in that regard. Otherwise, we have to learn it in more painful ways. I like Ambrose Bierce's definition of war in his Devil's Dictionary as God's way of teaching Americans geography. If we have to go fight and conquer an area like Vietnam or Belgium, then some of us at least will know where it is next time. Well, this is a painless way, relatively painless way of learning where things are. So the geography and chronology quiz will be coming up. It's indicated in the calendar. 2 response papers. Each paper should be about 1850 to 1900 words long, and says they have to be turned in at the beginning of class in hard copy. Well, we're not going to be doing hard copy this time. It's going to be, sorry, I should have changed that. It's going to be online, but the dates are indicated. These are not research papers. Let me clarify that. These are papers based on your reading. If you want to do research on the outside, that's fine. It's up to you. But my real objective is to have you go back to the things that you've read in class. This also lessens your workload. As you read a text, look for things that interest you. Mark passages that interest you. Then see if you can turn them into a paper. You can address an issue, a theme that's shared between 2 books, or a theme that's in 1 book, some subject that interests you, the treatment of women in the Shahnameh, or the way God is depicted in Al-Ghazali, or what the Khalil and Dimna has to say about intrigue in the court. I mean, there are any number of things that you can do. The midterm is that 25% of the class will cover the first half of the course. Final exam, 25% will cover the last half of the course pretty much. Maybe some review questions and a few questions on chronology and geography. Then there are 2 expanded experience papers. Those are really simple. They won't even be graded in a way. You just have to turn them in, and you can turn them in at any point. There is a date beyond which you should not turn them in, but you can turn them in at any point, and they involve just doing something that is outside of class. Watching a Middle Eastern movie, writing up a page on it. The paper won't even be graded. Eating a Middle Eastern meal and writing up a page on it. Cooking a Middle Eastern food, reading a Middle Eastern short story. Some experience, could be music or something like that. Some experience that I don't do in class. That's why it's called expanded experience paper. Could be a visit to a mosque. It could be any number of those things. I want you to be careful about attendance. We'll try to watch. If there's someone who misses multiple times, we'll try to get in contact with you because I don't want people getting into crisis that they can't climb out of. Anybody who has special concerns should drop me a note or contact me by phone or something like that, and something might be able to be worked out. Then you can read the BYU policies if you care to, the next several pages. I hope that's clear enough about the assignments. In the calendar, I'll often say, begin reading X. That's not the day you'll be quizzed on it. If you look further, it'll say, for example, today, January 12th, start reading Kalila and Dimna. On the 21st, reading quiz and discussion on Kalila and Dimna. Start reading Al-Ghazali's Path to Sufism. So everything should be clearly indicated. And on days when there are just lectures marked, I will have ways of sticking things in. Otherwise, I give you specific topics that we'll be discussing on any given day. And the tests will be drawn partly not just from the reading, but from things I lecture on. So, all right. Hope that's clear enough. If you have any questions, ask me. Now, I want to now give you a kind of whirlwind tour of mosques around the world. This is partly for fun. Some of these mosques you will eventually be required to know something about, but we'll return to those. Here we go. The mosque. So, there we go. I want to give you some sense of the worldwide scope of Islam and of the regional variations. And this is one way of doing it, by giving you an idea of the diversity of mosque architecture. I'll be talking later on a little bit about the nature and definition of a mosque. Mosque is a corruption. It's an English corruption of a Spanish corruption of an Arabic word, masjid, which means a place where you bow, a place where you prostrate yourself. To bow or to prostrate oneself is the verb sajada. And so a masjid is a place where you do that. So it's a place of worship. It's the Islamic place of worship, the equivalent of a chapel or a church. And it's taken a number of forms. As I'll talk to you later about what's required. Basically, not much is required for a mosque. It should be a flat place where there's room for people to pray. And then ideally it should have a marker of the direction of Mecca, because Muslims pray toward the holy city of Mecca. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. They don't pray to the east. A lot of people have that misunderstanding that Muslims pray to the east. Now, they may pray to the east if Mecca is in the east, but if they're north of Mecca, they'll be praying to the south. If they're south of Mecca, praying to the north. If they're east of Mecca, they'll be praying to the west. If they're in outer space, that's a whole different issue. If you're orbiting the Earth at a rapid speed, that becomes a theological issue in and of itself, which, by the way, has been solved. There are official Islamic fatwas, or legal decisions, on what a Muslim astronaut should do in terms of the 5 daily prayers. But you pray toward Mecca. In space, by the way, in case you're curious, you pray at the times of Mecca, that is using the Meccan time zone, and you pray toward a line that emerges from the center of the earth through Mecca, as at the beginning of your prayer, because it'll move while you're praying, but you remain praying in that direction. In case any of you really care about legal rulings for Muslim astronauts. I don't know how practical that will be for most of you, but all right. So there's a view of Cairo, a city where I lived for about 4 years, and so this is a familiar skyline in Cairo, and there's some very interesting things that have grouped together there, different mosques. This is not a scene you would actually see because they don't all line up this way. Some of these you will actually have to know in this class. So, for example, let's see, there's the cursor. Over here, that doubled minaret is the minaret of Al-Azhar Mosque and University. We will talk about that in more detail. That's one you will remember, but you don't have to remember it now. This is the dome of the Sultan Hassan Madrasa and Mosque. And over here you can see the crenellations on the wall of the Mosque of Ahmed ibn Tulun.
Could you use the pencil?
Okay, so...
Laser pointer.
Yeah, we'll use a laser pointer here.
It's easier for them to see.
Okay, this is easier for you to see, I think. So anyway, those are 3 buildings that you will need to know, but not yet. Don't worry. Just sit back and enjoy. Now, this is, as it happens, the inner courtyard of the Sultan Hassan Mosque and a madrasa, or school, from the 14th century. This is one of my favorite buildings in Cairo. This is an artistic depiction of it from the 19th century. And you see several things here, which, by the way, give you some sense of the scope of this building. It's enormous. And here in the center, some things that you'll become familiar with as we go on and talk about mosques and architecture. I see I have a question. I'll get to it in just a second. I wanted to point to this. This is the ablution fountain. This is where people sit. They'll sit on a bench there. There's a place for their feet. You can't see it. It's a depressed area on the other side of the bench. Then there's water here. They wash their hands, their feet, their faces, their arms up to the elbows, and so on, in order to be in a state of ritual cleanliness for prayer. And then you see the marble floor. You see one of the liwans, there are 4 of them in this building, covered archways or porticos. And back in the background, you have the mihrab indicating the direction of prayer. We'll talk about all of this. Don't worry. Don't try to absorb it all right now. Okay, question. Oh, about those experience and response papers, will we submit them on Learning Suite or by email? I think we want to submit them by Learning Suite. But I will be sure, I'll talk to Bryn, the TA, and ask how she would prefer to have them come in. Okay? All right. Back to this image. Well, let's move on from this. So there are the Arabic words, masjid, from sajda to bow or prostrate oneself. So now you know. And so one of the main requirements for a mosque is what you can see it has here, which is a large floor. Now it's a marble floor in this case, so people will often bring a prayer carpet like this one, or it will be covered by the mosque itself, because otherwise you're banging your knees up in your head pretty hard. This is another example of a courtyard in a mosque with a horseshoe arch, very prominent, and you could say this is a keel arch with the pointed point. These are horseshoe arches here. We'll talk about them more. And just to give you a sense of the way these buildings look on the interior, with hanging mosque lamps. These would be glass with oil and a floating wick. This is a mosque in Central Asia, probably, more over in the Iranian area. And here the ablution fountain, the place for washing before prayer, is located outside, or at least people are using this pool that way. A mosque is often a place where people sit in the shade, in the quiet of a mosque, out of the noise of a city, and read. This is a typical little wooden Quran or book stand. I have one myself. They're very, very nice. You just put the book there, and it holds it open, but not flat. Anyway, not much to say about this. I just want to give you an impression. This is inside a mosque that I heartily dislike. We'll talk about it later. This is the Muhammad Ali Mosque on the Citadel of Cairo. I've never liked this building, but it's an important one, I suppose, in its way. There in the background, you have the ablution fountain again, little stools that people would sit on here in order to wash their hands and feet and so on, and then the courtyard. And here's 2 people praying. Notice they've taken their shoes off, and these are 2 phases of the prayer, the Salat prayer of Islam. It involves reciting certain prayers, prostrating oneself, and so on. And this is the bell tower that was given. This mosque is a 19th century mosque. That's a bell tower that belongs to it. So I think I have a question again. Where can we see the chapters or sections to be quizzed on for the readings? They're there in the schedule. When we have a quiz on a book, it is the entire book, with the exception of the Shahnameh, which is divided up. So, for example, let's see, you have various quizzes on the stories of reading quiz on Shahnameh, Rustam and Kai Kobad, and Kai Kavus's war against the demons of Mazenderan. So it gives you the stories that you'll be quizzed on. I hope that answers the question. If you need more information, we can maybe give you more. At one point, we did have it divided up by page number, but then the edition sometimes shifts, so that's a little confusing. But we'll see. If you need more help, we'll provide that for you. Okay. All right, so these men are engaged in prayer, one standing with his hands outstretched, his hands in cupping shape, and then reciting certain verses, and then touching the forehead to the floor in an act of the Salat prayer is an act of total submission to the God of the universe. And remember that Islam means submission. The verb aslama yuslimu means to submit. Islam is the verbal noun submission. And a Muslim, it's the active participle, means a submitter, someone who submits. And that's the proper pronunciation, Muslim and Islam, with a slightly hissing S and emphasis on the second syllable, not Islam, but Islam, Muslim, from Aslama Yuslimu. Just to give you a sense of world Muslim population, you don't need to memorize this, of course, but this shows that Islam is largely concentrated in the temperate zones of the world, but it's expanding. There are now substantial Muslim populations in Europe, which didn't used to be true, and in the United States, in South America, all around the world. Australia, I've met twice with the Imam of Adelaide, Australia, who's a Bosnian Serb. Stories about him to come in the semester, probably. Okay, now I just wanted to show you various mosques, mosque designs, and you'll notice as we go through the course that there are certain clear regional preferences. This is in Abu Dhabi, but it could be an Indian mosque in a way. It's kind of inspired by the Taj Mahal. Notice that it has multiple minarets, and this happens to be an extraordinarily beautiful mosque. This is a quintessential Turkish mosque with 6 minarets. Usually they only have 1 or 2. But the typical mark of a Turkish minaret, and I'll beat it into your heads until everybody gets it, is the minarets of these Turkish mosques tend to be extremely tall and pencil-shaped, very tall and thin and pencil-shaped. And the mosques have just a profusion of domes and quarter domes and half domes. That's because Turkey actually has a climate that gets rain. Much of the Middle East doesn't, but Turkey gets rain, and so you have to enclose a large space but cover it because of inclement weather. If you notice back here at this one, the minarets are quite different. They're not pointed at the top. They don't look like pencils. We'll see other kinds of minarets. So that's a Turkish mosque, a very Turkish mosque, and I want you to kind of keep that image in mind. It can be useful. 2 or 3 years ago, I was in Australia, and I was asked by the area authority in the area. It was in, where were we? Melbourne, I think. And I was asked to go out and speak at a mosque on behalf of the church there in the Melbourne area. And I asked him in advance, asked the Area 70, so what kind of a mosque is it? Is it Sunni or Shiite? Are they Arabs or Pakistanis, or what are they? And he said, well, I really don't know. And I was trying to decide how I should approach this. As we drove down the street, above the trees, in the distance, I saw tall, pencil-thin minarets and with pencil-sharp shapes at the top. And I thought immediately, Turkish. Absolutely clearly Turkish, and therefore Sunni. And, I'm already beginning to formulate how I'm going to approach it. And it was right, of course. It was a Turkish-influenced mosque. They were Turks, majority Turks who'd built it. This is a mosque in Saudi Arabia. This one is huge. This is part of the annual pilgrimage to Mecca. And you can see it's got a number of minarets in no particular architectural shape. It's been built onto for years. But it gives you an example of the sheer scale of this particular kind of mosque. It's designed to enclose as many people as it possibly can. This is one in Kuwait. Now, there isn't a style that looks quite like this anywhere. This one is obviously an amalgam of styles. But I would say that the colorful tile domes are clearly influenced by Iranian-style mosques. When you see the older mosques, they are distinctly Iranian. And that doesn't mean just within modern-day Persia, but within the Iranian cultural area, really, which is larger than today's Iran. The green windows, by the way, the green lit windows indicate something. Green is the traditional color associated with the Prophet Muhammad. That's why the flag of Saudi Arabia is that deep green that it is. Here's a mosque in Yemen, again with multiple minarets. Yemen is a pretty poor country, but obviously they put some money into this one. You see it here, really magnificent building. Some of the most magnificent religious architecture in the world, in my opinion, is mosque architecture. And one of the things I like about it is that traditionally the geometric patterns of traditional Islamic art lend themselves really well to modernization. So that you can't do the same thing with Rococo architecture out of Europe or Baroque architecture. It doesn't modernize at all. But traditional Islamic architecture sometimes goes very well into modern styles. This is one in Yemen. Again, a very different style. The tower of the building is reminiscent of certain old towers that go back into prehistoric times in Yemen. And I think they're connected, frankly, with the great and spacious building that Lehi saw, because we know they were being built in ancient times. And they rose high into the air, and the bottom floor had no windows for security reasons. So in the darkness, if the windows are backlit, they would seem to float in the air. This is a mosque in Dubai. However, I have to say that based on my experience, if I were guessing, if I didn't know it was from Dubai, I would guess this one was Egyptian. And there's probably a reason. There are a lot of Egyptian migrant workers in Dubai. The Egyptian economy is struggling, has been struggling for years with a big economy and no oil. And so a lot of Egyptians who get good educations go to work in the Gulf. So my bet is, I'll bet if you scratched very deeply, this would be a mosque that was built by Egyptians, because it is a classic Egyptian style. It doesn't have the pointed minarets of a Turkish mosque. It doesn't have the colored tile domes of a Persian mosque. This kind of mosque is found all over Cairo and all over Egypt. So I'm betting, though I don't know for sure, that this is an Egyptian-influenced mosque. Here's one in Pakistan, absolutely transparently modeled after the Taj Mahal. So a sort of Persianate feeling to it, but not. The Indian tradition, Indo-Pakistani tradition, the Indian subcontinent tradition, tends to have lower, thicker minarets, as you can see here. They don't use colored tiles on the dome or anything like that. They like white marble, or in many cases, red sandstone. You'll see both. And in the Taj Mahal, which is one of the buildings we will talk about at length, you'll see both of those. This is in Afghanistan. This is a very Persian-style mosque with the large, exaggerated entryway, the blue tiled domes. Not a Turkish-style minaret there far in the background on the left, but they tend to like raised, exaggerated entranceways, and you see them here. Now I say Afghanistan, but this is still a Persian-style mosque because the Persian cultural region extends beyond, as I say, beyond the modern territorial boundaries of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Afghanistan was a heavily Persian-influenced area. So are many areas in Central Asia. So you will see blue tile there. And they love this kind of thing, the floral arabesque patterns on the entryways, and yellow and blue tile, especially blue, but also a lot of yellow. So this is not a mosque you'll need to know, but I want you to sort of recognize the style and know basically where it comes from. Okay, question. Are people allowed to visit the inside of mosques when people are not praying, or are these mosques like our temples, where it is inappropriate for non-members to visit? In almost every case, non-Muslims can enter mosques. I know of one mosque in Cairo that it's illegitimate for non-Muslims to enter. That's the Sayyid Hussein Mosque, very large mosque out by the Bazaar area, by the Khan al-Khalili Bazaar and by Al-Azhar University. But most other mosques you can go into, and a non-Muslim is not allowed to enter Mecca at any time. But you can enter a mosque, and they don't even block you even when it's prayer time, though you have to be really careful. I want to stress this as mosque etiquette. If you ever visit a mosque, there will be people praying there almost all the time, because sometimes they miss the formal prayer hours. It is not appropriate, if you can avoid it, don't walk between the person praying and the mihrab, the marker on the wall indicating the direction of Mecca. In other words, don't walk in front of them when they're praying. That's considered very poor etiquette. Let me tell you a story of being in a mosque. Some of you, if you've been in a class with me before, may have heard this story. My very first time in a mosque, many years ago, was when I was going over for a semester abroad program to Jerusalem with BYU. But we went to Cairo first in that particular semester. And the very first full day that we were in Egypt, two of us headed out to explore the city. So we went to Tahrir Square, which is the most important plaza in Cairo. It's actually round, but it's called Tahrir Square, Meydan Tahrir in Arabic. It doesn't mean square, but we call it a square. It's round, but on one side of the square, there is a mosque called the Omar Mahram Mosque. And it's not particularly important historically or architecturally, but it's very large. And it's often used for major funerals and that sort of thing. Well, we were walking toward it. One of them said, let's go into the mosque. Well, I said, I'm not even sure, at that point, I didn't know. I'm not even sure that we're allowed to go into the mosque. And he said, well, let's try. Well, then the call to prayer sounded, and it turned out it was Friday at noon. So people from all over Tahrir Square began to come into the mosque, and it can hold several thousand. Well, we continued to walk. I was saying, I don't think we ought to go. This doesn't seem appropriate to me to go where when they're praying. And the other one said, oh, let's go in and have a look. Well, we walked toward it, and we were ushered in, no problem with admitting us. They let us right in. And they ushered us out into the floor where we ended up on, I can't remember, it was the third or fourth or fifth row of worshipers out of thousands of people, right behind the imam, right in the center on the main floor. And so suddenly everyone around us drops down to their knees, and they're praying. And this was right after the Iranian Revolution. Yes, I'm that old. And I remember saying to the others, the two guys, one on each side, I don't know about you, but I'm getting down on my knees. You know, I show real courage in these circumstances. So I dropped to my knees. When they got up, I got up. When they knelt down, I knelt down. And, you know, I thought, we are so dead. This is so inappropriate for us to be here. But fortunately, the people around us just obviously recognized these are three foreign idiots. And they didn't do anything to us. They were very polite, even though we didn't know what we were doing. And as we went out, by the way, one of them said to me, I've lost my soul. I've been worshiping an idol. I said, no, you haven't. I mean, I knew that much. And he said, well, I've been kneeling down before an idol. I said, where was the idol? There's no idol in a mosque. He said, well, there was that recessed area on the wall, the mihrab, the prayer niche that marks the direction of Mecca. And I said, well, there was no idol in it. And he said, well, maybe it was out for cleaning. And I said, no, it's never out for cleaning. There's no idol there. Idolatry is the worst possible sin in Islam. You have not lost your soul. You know, it's like, to me, if you're sitting in the middle of a Catholic congregation and they say stand up or sit down for prayer or whatever, I stand up and sit down. It seems to me elemental respect for the people around me. I don't want to disrupt their worship service.
Latter-day Saint chapels take the sacrament.
So, sorry?
Visitors to Latter-day Saint meetings take the sacrament.
Yeah, visitors to Latter-day Saint meetings often take the sacrament. I mean, strictly speaking, they shouldn't, but we're not going to make a fuss about it. They don't mean ill. And so, you know, a certain amount of charity and tolerance, and, you know, tolerance for imbeciles can go a long way. So anyway, yeah, you can go into most mosques. And one of the things that we'll encourage you to do in this class, if it's appropriate given the pandemic and everything, is to maybe go up and visit one of the mosques in Salt Lake Valley. There's a mosque in West Valley City. There are a couple of others. And our students have often gone up there and gone up even for the Friday prayers or whatever. And the imam up there is used to us, and they're very friendly. So if you are inclined to do that, that could be one of the things you could do, and maybe we can help organize it for an expanded experience paper topic or something like that. So, all right. Okay, so here, another question. Yep. Have you prayed in a mosque since then, or do you usually avoid it? Well, I don't do the Muslim prayers. I have been invited to do that. I think it would be inappropriate. But I've been in mosques many times during Friday services or at other times, listened to mosque sermons. I have no problem with that at all. In fact, I enjoy it. I really sense, real devotion, real holiness going on in mosque services and the prayers. So I recommend it. It's a good experience. I've spoken in mosques. I've been in many, many, many mosques, often during prayer times. So again, that's one experience that you might well enjoy. All right. I don't know that I have anything particular to say about this, except that this is a really beautiful example, another example of a beautiful mosque. I want you to get some sense of the variety of structures out there in different areas. This is one in Syria. Oh, we have another question. Yeah. I am Muslim. If anyone would like to join the Friday prayers in the Wilk, you're more than welcome. Yes, that's in fact one thing I was going to mention, that we have a room set apart at the Wilkinson Center for prayers. And if you'd like to join in, well, as she says, you're welcome. And I think it's a good experience. I mean, it's important to see this and to understand that these people are worshiping God. And by the way, let me say something. One other argument that I made to my friend back then, all those years, who was worried that we'd been praying to a false god or to an idol, I pointed out to him, and I pointed out to you, this is fundamentally important to know, that some people think, some non-Muslims think, that Muslims worship a false god called Allah. Allah, I think we say. The word is actually pronounced Allah, with a doubled L, Allah, and emphasis on the second syllable, right? But I want to stress what Allah is. Allah is not the name of God. Allah is the Arabic word God. It's related, if you care to know, it's related to the Hebrew word Elohim, which means God, especially if you take off the I am ending, which is a plural ending, interestingly enough, in Hebrew. Eloh, E-L-O-H. Can you see the resemblance between that and Allah? Allah with the doubled L is a contraction of two words, al, meaning the, and hyphen, if you will, I-L-A-H. Take the off. You have I-L-A-H. Compare that to the Hebrew form, E-L-O-H. And you see, it's like German Gott and English God. So they're worshiping the same God that Christians are. And yeah, if we can arrange that, if you want to share the room and the time for prayer in the Wilkinson Center, please do. Okay, room 3250. And you do, I presume it's the Friday noon prayers, so roughly noon. But I think it would be a great experience for any of you to go visit and appreciate that. Is it considered rude to take pictures outside or in a mosque? No. Although I would not probably take pictures of people praying without their permission. That would seem to me a little bit much. But no, there's no harm in taking pictures in a mosque or especially outside a mosque. No problem at all. So I've said this in another class already today, but I'll say it again. I have seen myself for a long time as a kind of missionary for Islam. I'm not trying to convert people to Islam. I'm not a Muslim, but I see myself as attempting to help people understand that Islam is not as foreign to the Judeo-Christian tradition, if you will, as they may think. We really have a lot in common. We're worshiping the same God, a lot of the same prophetic figures and same values. So it's really important. As I say, this class is not a religion class, but that is a subtext. I want you to understand that we're closely related. We're cousins. All right. This is a mosque in Syria. I will admit, I don't like it much. It seems boxy to me. I like the dome and so on, but the rest of it looks like an apartment building or something. So, but I'm trying to give you some sense of the variety of Islamic architecture. Some mosques, many mosques, are absolutely gorgeous. This one, in my humble opinion, not so much. But I'm sure someone likes it. And now this one I want to point out to you because it's a very old minaret. Not all minarets are tall and pencil thin. This one is in a village or in a town in Iraq called Samarra. And the mosque is now gone. All that survives of it is the minaret. But the minaret's interesting. It probably echoes the idea of the ancient ziggurat, like the Tower of Babel in the Bible, the tower built to get up to heaven. Those were the ancient towers built by the Mesopotamians. This is probably modeled on one of those. Maybe some still survived around 800 when this one was built. So this is very, very thick with an exterior, ramp going up to the top. And I want you to remember this because we'll later see a small minaret on a large building, I should say, in Cairo, the Ibn Tulun Mosque, that has somewhat this shape. And it's instructive when you learn that the man who built that mosque, Ahmed ibn Tulun, was from Samarra. I'm sure that this was in his mind when he designed that or had his servants design it. I want to tell you a totally irrelevant story about Samarra that I always bring up at this stage just because I like it so much. I will have probably no other occasion to talk about Samarra in the class, so let me tell this story. The story is told of a kindly man in Baghdad in the Middle Ages who had a servant, and he's sending the servant into the marketplace to buy food and goods, and he's a very kindly man, and he sends the servant away, and the servant comes back very, very quickly, too soon, terrified, obviously afraid. And the kindly master says, well, what's wrong? What happened? And he said, well, I was there in the marketplace and I saw death. And death made a threatening motion toward me. Now, I don't know what death is supposed to look like in this. I imagine he's carrying a scythe and has a hood on with no face or something. I don't know how you tell death. But he says, I'm terrified. And he was obviously threatening me. So will you allow me to go away? Let me go to Samarra. And his master, who is, as I say, a nice man, says, absolutely. You go to Samarra. Get away now. And so then the master is a little angry about this. So he goes into the marketplace in Baghdad and he looks around and he finds death. And he goes up to him and he says, how dare you threaten my servant? You scared him this morning in the marketplace. And Death says, oh, no. I wasn't trying to scare him. I was just surprised to see him here. You see, I have an appointment with him this evening in Samarra. And so the point of the story is, of course, that you can't escape death. The fellow thinks he's escaping, and instead he's just going to the place where death will meet him. Anyway, Samarra was, for a brief time, the alternate capital of the Abbasid Empire when they abandoned Baghdad for just a few years and went there and built many great buildings like this one. But they didn't build them very well, which is why most of them are gone. But this minaret survives. Now here's one that I just like because it's so spectacular and so different with its color scheme and so on. This is in Azerbaijan. Just a gorgeous, unexpected building, but it actually fits very well with the color of the building behind it. They're color coordinated. So again, just trying to give you some sense of the richness that's out there. This is the Mosque of Muhammad Ali up on top of the Citadel in Cairo. This is the one I told you I really don't like. I've never liked it very much, and I'm sorry for that. It has a really spectacular place in Cairo up on top of the Citadel, one of the tallest locations, the tallest location in the city. And you can tell if you look at it that there's some Turkish influence here, even if it's in Egypt. Well, the reason is that the man who built it, Muhammad Ali, not the boxer, by the way, the 19th century governor of Egypt, he was a Turkish governor, allegedly. He basically was independent. But but he built a mosque to remind himself of the places that he grew up with. So it has the tall, pencil-thin minarets with the pencil tops and the domes and half domes and so on. I just don't like the mosque. It's fairly dark and I just don't find it attractive. It's not very original, but if you like it, that's fine. I won't say anything about it. But this is not one of the ones that we're going to be tested on in this class. Here is something that I like much more in Egypt. Egypt didn't do colored tiles on its domes, but it did carved stonework, magnificent stonework. They were really, really good at this. Egypt was blessed with a lot of stone. That's why they have pyramids, right? One of the reasons. And so they tend to build these domes out of carved stone, and the stones are carved individually and then fitted together, and they're just marvelous. In fact, what I really need to do is put together a slide presentation on the domes of Cairo. They are stunning, and the artistry of them is amazing. Beside this one, you see a pretty typical Egyptian minaret, fairly tall, not stubby like the Persian ones, but not pointed like the Turkish ones, and with a lot of carved stone, including these carved stone railings here that are really beautifully done. And we'll see a fair amount of that. But I stand in awe of the stone carving ability that created things like this. And there are many, many more, and they're all different. This is another mosque in Cairo. I show it simply to show you how tall the minaret can sometimes be. The building itself is down around here. This is fairly modern. As you can tell, it's got a clock involved at the base of the minaret. So the purpose of the minaret is to allow the prayer call to be sounded. But for many people now, they want to see a clock to know when the prayer call will be, or when the prayer times will be. So there you have it. But that's just a fairly typical, if rather high, modern Egyptian mosque. At the other extreme, here's one that you see in Mali. This is in the area that is known as Timbuktu. You can see, by the way, it's got loudspeakers affixed to it. One there, one over here. So that when the call to prayer happens, and I'll play that for you at a certain point, people can hear it throughout the village or throughout the town. This one's made out of mud. So, not marble like some of the others. You'll see mosques of all different kinds in different places. This one in Ghana, obviously very simple. Not every mosque has to be grand. This is more a traditional Ghanaian style of building. Rather odd to our taste, but done in a sort of folk style. This one in Tunisia with whitewashed brick. I've always wondered what happened here. It looks like it sort of melted in the sun or something, and they didn't get the whitewashing all the way up to the top. And around it, there's a cemetery. So this is a very humble, simple mosque out in the middle of nowhere. But again, a mosque just like the grand ones that you see in the great cities. This is one in Algiers, and to me, it looks almost like Spanish colonial style. Even though it is recognizably Islamic, it's got some flavor from its area way over in the west of the Islamic world. You can see a building like this almost in Balboa Park in San Diego. Some of the buildings there have a flavor like that. You'll sometimes see some relationship between colonial Spanish architecture and Islamic architecture. The use of colored tile and patios and fountains and so on is common to both. I love this one, very modern, but looking like a tribal hut. So it's a stylized, I suppose, a thatched roof hut in a tribal village. So there's a wide variety of mosque architecture, every kind of style. This is another sort of boxy one in Senegal. I'm, again, not overly fond of this one, I have to admit, but it's striking and very modern in its way. I don't always like all modern architecture. I don't overly like this. It's a box with two things attached to it, three things. But, the architect liked it, and maybe the people he built it for liked it too. I don't know. In Pakistan, I told you that many of the mosques and the grandiose architecture are constructed with red sandstone, sometimes using some white marble. This is clearly a relative of the Taj Mahal, which we'll talk about in more detail later on. But it's a gorgeous thing. It has something of the feel of Persian architecture, but not quite. India is its own distinct realm. The domes are their own thing. These minarets with their little cupolas at the top. And these are very Indian. They're genetically related to Persian-style mosques, but their own thing. We'll talk more about Indian architecture in connection with the Taj Mahal. Here's one in Kazakhstan. Very different with a gold dome. Uzbekistan, again broadly related to Iranian style with the blue tile dome, but it has something, this ribbed style, which is unique. Here's the blue tile going up here, and the minaret is broken off, unfortunately. It's probably not much taller, about like that. And much of the tile is faded or has actually fallen off here. But with the large, exaggerated keel archway entrance, this, where the entryway actually goes up higher than the building proper, that is very Iranian. So well beyond Iran, today's Iran, into Central Asia especially is where you'll see these blue tile mosques. This one is in Brunei. What can I say? Just a spectacular modern mosque that is picking up older ideas. Another one in Malaysia. I want to go fairly quickly because I want, if I can, to finish these. Another one in Malaysia. Notice the arabesque design here. That is an homage in a way to the Taj Mahal, which has similar designs on its front. But otherwise it doesn't look like it at all. There it is again. Another one in Malaysia. This is super modern. This looks like something out of a 23rd century science fiction movie. I can imagine a mosque in Space City, 24th century or something like that. Malaysia too, almost looks like an office building, but it's a mosque. You can see the little crescent moon up on top of the dome that indicates what you're dealing with. Singapore. It is not Turkish, but it's imitating Turkish-style mosque. But anyway, this one in Sri Lanka reminds me of a candy cane. I don't have much to say about it, just really, really interesting. Again, I'm not sure I like it, but it's really interesting. Now, China. How does Chinese culture affect mosques? This is a mosque. Look at the Arabic writing here, but look at the style. It's this is not Middle Eastern. Look at the huge minaret in the background. That's more like the one you saw in Samara. So this is a hodgepodge of different cultures. Here's another one with the enormous minaret. This is in China. Very different look. Over in northwestern China, at the Chinese end of the Silk Road. Another mosque in China. And that one. So again, some of you will be able to read this. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. There's no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Written in Arabic. I doubt very many people in that congregation could read it, but somebody was able to do an Arabic inscription above the gate into the territory of this mosque. Here's a nice view. You'd never guess this was a mosque, would you? If you didn't know. The dragons on the roof and all that kind of thing. But it is a mosque. Another one in China. Again, probably out in the Uyghur areas in the northwest. As I say, a mosque can be very, very simple. This is a simple one in Macau. Very, very simple. It's got sort of a token minaret up here, but otherwise just a simple functional place where people can gather with air conditioning and pray. Indonesia, this looks colonial. Java, another one that looks like a stylized village hut or something like that. This is one in Pakistan that I'm really fond of. The background looked just barely enough like somewhere in Utah, especially if you didn't see all the green, that there was talk at one point a while ago of a Muslim community trying to build a mosque in Orem. I was all for it. I'd heard rumors there's going to be opposition to it. So I was really looking forward to going to the city council and doing battle on behalf of the Muslims. But it turned out there was no opposition at all. Nobody was really upset about it. The only problem is they didn't have the money to do it. But at one point, trying to gin up some controversy, I posted this on my blog as an image of the mosque they were trying to build in Orem. Didn't work. I didn't get any controversy. This is one in Spain. I just go through these very quickly again because I'm running out of time. This is meant to look sort of European with European building materials, as Zahra restaurant is near it. It's obviously in a Muslim area of town. But it's a mix of European and Muslim styles. This one in England, I'm not sure I'd even recognize it as a mosque without really looking at it, but it is. Germany, that's just a little strange, but it's great for the birds. They're really enjoying it. But the minarets are very stylized. They're not used for the call to prayer here because in many European countries, I think Germany, I know Switzerland, they don't allow the call to prayer because it's regarded as noise pollution. So the mosques are purely to indicate this is, the minarets are purely to indicate this is a mosque. This is one in Germany that I swear this reminds me of a church I know in Vienna. Very much designed to fit into European style architecture, but it is a mosque. Okay, I have a question. Minarets look like the spires on the Portland Temple. Yeah, back a few, right? These? Those, maybe. I'm not sure. But yeah, Portland Temple does look like it has that kind of minaret spire. Here's one in Brazil. There's a sizable population of Muslims now in certain areas of Brazil. In the town of Iguaçu, for example, I was stunned to see Oriental carpet merchants and mosques and everything else. I kept asking myself, where am I? I thought I was in Brazil. But Iguaçu, at least, is substantially Muslim. This one in Kuwait. One in Malaysia, which looks to me like some sort of Star Wars spacecraft about to take off. And my favorite of all mosques, I think. I tell you that a mosque only requires a flat space and an indication of the direction of Mecca, ideally. Well, that's this one. It's in a national park, an undersea park or game reserve or nature preserve off the shore of Saudi Arabia. And here you have a mosque constructed of PVC piping. And there you have a small congregation, 3 or 4 divers plus the imam who's leading the prayer in the direction of Mecca. So this illustrates that, mosque styles can come in all shapes and forms, including that room in the Wilkinson Center, which can function as a mosque. It doesn't have to have minarets. It doesn't have to have all sorts of elaborate architecture. It can be very simple, as this is. So that is my little slide presentation for the day. And we're just about out of time as it is. Wow, did I time that well?
There's the Portland Temple.
Yeah, there's the Portland Temple. Yeah. You could take those as minarets if you wanted, I suppose. Beautiful building. I'm going to show you some more slides in the next few days because I want you to have some sense of what things look like, what a mosque is, what the parts of a mosque are, and things like that. But that was just today. I hope to interest you a little bit. I hope that you'll enjoy it. And this class has been video recorded, so if you want to see something, if you miss something, if you just savor the sound of my voice, my handsome visage on the computer, you can come back and you can spend hours with it if you want. I won't be doing that, but anyway. All right, well, but have a great day, and I hope to see at least 1 or 2 of you back again on Thursday.